Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Beyond the Hire podcast. On Beyond the Hire, we dive into recruiting for the go-to-market space, what it takes to build winning teams, and how industry leaders got to where they are today. I am joined by Niamh O'Donnell. She's the Director of Programs at Unusual, where she runs Unusual Academy and other initiatives to help early-stage founders access the right insights and connections at the right time. Her expertise stems from prior roles at 500 Global, where she led co-investor relations, Enterprise Ireland, where she helped Irish startups expand into the US, and Notre Dame's Idea Center, where she supported the commercialization of emerging startups. Before that, Niamh worked at the forefront of generative AI at Ascent Learning and was an award-winning entrepreneur herself, lending her rare empathy to the pace and ambiguity of the 0 to 1 stage. Niamh holds degrees from the University of Notre Dame, KEDGE Business School, and Dublin City University, and lives in San Francisco. She's had quite the life, quite the career, so much education. I'm so excited that she's here with us. Welcome, Niamh. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sandra. Delighted to be here.
Oh my gosh. So that's a mouthful, right? That introduction on its own. And there's so much to dive into. And I kind of want to start at the start. So you were born and raised in Ireland. Am I correct?
Yeah, so I was born in Dublin and then raised in Kildare, which is about 40 minutes outside of the city. It's the horse racing county. So I would walk to primary school and there'd be horseback riders. So very kind of humble beginnings, I would say. Yeah.
How many people live there?
In my village, it's, I think, 1,200 people. So there's a shop, a pub, and a school right beside a race course called the Curragh Race Course. The army barracks are around there as well. The county itself, I'm not totally sure, but probably several 100,000. But Ireland as a nation is about 5 million people. So very small compared to even California, which is like 8 times the size.
No, it's very, very small. For those regular listeners, they know I'm from the Netherlands. And even comparatively, it's smaller. So had you any connection to America already? Did you know when you were smaller that you wanted to move to America?
Yeah, so it was always my dream. Actually, my great aunt, she moved out here. So she actually, when she was in Germany, she met an American guy who was in the military. And they fell in love and he whisked her out to the Bay Area. He had a company called Red Top Electric, which did it's still actually around, but does electric cabling for a lot of the high-rise buildings across the city. And then they sponsored a lot of my family to move out here. So my immediate family, so my mom, my brothers, everyone like that is back in Ireland. And I don't have citizenship here, but I have a lot of second cousins. I had been here for the first time at the age of 5. And ever since then, it was my favorite place in the world. So obviously, it's very difficult to have the opportunity to come over here because immigration and you need sponsorship and different things. So I wasn't sure it was possible, but obviously been very fortunate and obviously maneuvered a way to get out of here myself. Mom and dad are obviously back home and they have ambitions. I'll go back eventually, but who knows?
No, I love it. It's quite something. We actually get reached out to more often than you'd think from international, either students or young professionals who ask, do you guys offer sponsorship? We really want to work in America at all these really cool tech companies that you guys work with, but it's much harder than you think, to arrange all of that. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, as I know from my personal experience. Me, kind of a fellow European or someone who has done what I've done, I'm always very impressed and curious. I'm like, how did you make it happen? So I want to kind of broach that, but let's take a few steps back. So you went to Dublin City University, where you did your bachelor's of business studies, and you also studied French. Am I correct?
Yeah, so it's international business and French. And then I did the equivalent of a master's in management through French in Bordeaux for a couple of years. And then came back to Ireland. And then off the back of that, then started my career. So quite interesting. But one interesting thing that actually happened a little bit earlier is I actually had my own company in Ireland. So I designed my own set of makeup brushes, where it was a company called Pink and Smoky. And I was 16 years old at the time. So at the time, if you wanted to get a makeup brush, they were always sold individually. So one MAC makeup brush was about €50. And what I noticed is, like, to get all the makeup brushes you need in one set, you were spending hundreds of euro. They were all kind of the same color. Usually they were black, didn't have a cool and funky design. So I went about it myself to design my own set of makeup brushes and found a manufacturer in China who made them to my specifications, sold them in salons across Ireland. And off the back of that, I was awarded Ireland's Best Young Entrepreneur at the All Ireland Student Enterprise Award and Griffith College Enterprise Award. So that competition was 30,000 students in Ireland entered that. And I got a patent, I got a trademark, I had partnerships with makeup artistry colleges across Ireland, sold my products in salons. So that was kind of my first dip into entrepreneurship. I still technically own the company, but I'm not trading right now. But that was where I kind of started, and then obviously went into my career, obviously in studies and DCU, which was interesting as well.
You are such a go-getter. I was saying to Nikki, our co-host here on Beyond the Hire, Niamh is quite impressive. And especially, we sent some questions over before we record the podcast, and I was reading everything. And I'm like, no, she's a good one. She's had quite the career and she's achieved so much. So that's very impressive. I don't know what the hell I was doing at 16, but it definitely wasn't that. That's incredible. So at a very early age, you were an entrepreneur. How did that influence what you wanted to study?
So I think for me, it was always I wanted to be a businesswoman. I used to watch The Apprentice growing up, and obviously I'd watch like Suits, and obviously Suits is about lawyers, but it was people suited and booted going around New York, similar like The Apprentice, which is based in London. And I used to just say to my parents, I want to be like that. I want to be closing deals. I want to be building businesses. I didn't know in what form that would manifest, but I saw sales as something that was very sexy and interesting to me. And I think the idea of building a company was very, very interesting to me as well. What I would say is I also wanted to work in tech. And that's one of the reasons I actually stopped doing Pink and Smoky, is because I started getting branded in Ireland as the makeup girl. And what I loved about Pink and Smoky was building a business and making revenue and having profit margins. It wasn't really makeup per se. Obviously, I'm feminine, I love beauty, but not enough to do that for my entire life, more as kind of like a hobby. So off the back of that, I decided to go to DCU. And in Ireland, obviously, you have OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta. They all have their European HQs there. But a lot of them have a requirement that if you want to work for an American multinational in Ireland, you need to have a second language. So it made sense for me at that time to go to DCU, study business with French. So that would exemplify my opportunity to potentially get into a Google. And then I thought off the back of that, potentially come out to Silicon Valley after a number of years. But obviously it manifested in a very different way, which was probably better than what I ever imagined at that age.
Something that stands out to me as you're talking right now is that you were very conscious and aware of kind of where you wanted to go and what you needed in order to get there. Even the fact you're saying, oh, I second language, and that's why I studied what I studied. I think if we have any younger listeners, I know most of our listeners have finished obviously university before. If we have a few that haven't yet, look at the dream job you want, look at what the requirements are. I think that's so clever. And then make sure that you at least add a minor that'll help you get there and stand out, because it's something everyone should be doing. But I feel like a lot of us at 18 are just not necessarily advanced enough to know that or make those decisions, unless people want stereotypical jobs like doctor or lawyer.
I would totally agree. I think if you have a clear view of what you want to be, it's much easier to reverse engineer how you become that than just throwing darts into like the dark.
Like a lot of us do. So tell me, how did you end up at Enterprise Ireland? And what drew you to Enterprise Ireland?
Yeah, so this is the kind of funny thing that's quite interesting, where like every chapter kind of snowballs into the next chapter. Sometimes it's not the last chapter leads to the next chapter, it's a chapter before that. So when I did Pink and Smoky and I won the All Ireland Student Enterprise Awards, that competition was backed by Enterprise Ireland, right? So when I graduated, the Enterprise Ireland graduate program is one of the most prestigious in Ireland. There's usually about 5,000 applicants every single year for about 20 spots. They send one person to San Francisco every single year. And for those of you who don't know, Enterprise Ireland is the venture arm of the Irish government. It's actually the largest seed stage investor in Europe by deal flow. So they write about 200 checks a year. Very, very active. And in Ireland as a nation, there's about 4 funds, and Enterprise Ireland touches about 90% of the startups in Ireland. So really being there, you get to be at the heart of the innovation ecosystem. So that was really interesting to me. I was really interested in startups, and really in Ireland, there's no better place to work with startups than at Enterprise Ireland because of the sheer mass of exposure that organization has. So I applied, and then obviously I was very successful off the back of Pink and Smoky. They saw me as very different than other applicants. I think I was about 22 at the time, if I'm remembering correctly. And yeah, naturally, having had my own business, won awards, made sales, lived in France, done a really good degree, I was successful. So I started as an investor in Dublin. And then within a year, there was a promotion opportunity to go to San Francisco. I was the youngest in the running and they chose me. So it was a dream opportunity, dream come true. But it's interesting because my timeline was potentially I'll get to America in my 30s. I was like, I probably have to get into a Google, do my tenure. There's a huge backlog of people who want to get out to the States. It might take 10 or so years, but I got it literally within a year of leaving college. I got that opportunity, which was amazing.
Honestly, as you're talking, I'm like, wow, you're so intimidating. I would never want to go up against you in anything, really, truly, anything in life. You're also, I mean, not that it's important at all. You're also stunning. So, I'm like, please don't ever compete with me for anything. That would be great. Thank you so much. All right. So you got your time in SF and then you came back, or did you stay there in SF?
So I was in San Francisco. So my role slightly changed, and my job was leading the enterprise software and digital entertainment portfolios across 12 states. So my job was helping Irish Indigenous companies scale into the West Coast, which was amazing. A lot of shaking hands, kissing babies. St. Patrick's Day, we had prime ministers come out from Ireland and going around all the HQs and meeting Sundar Pichai and very, very fascinating people. So that was amazing. But and it was very fascinating as well because it was during the pandemic when I first got sent out to San Francisco. So borders were shut to America, but I had a diplomatic visa. So I remember I'd go to bars and they'd be like, we want to see your COVID cert. And I had a European COVID cert. And they'd be like, how do you have a European COVID cert? Borders are shut. And I'm like, I'm a diplomat. Yeah, that was very interesting. Did that. But when you're in diplomacy, you do rotations. So my next promotion was to go home, which America had really gotten under my skin at that point. I established quite a good network. I just loved the energy of the Bay Area and the surroundings. And I call it Disneyland for adults: hiking, skiing, surfing. You've got everything at your doorstep here you could ever want. At that point, I was figuring out my options and I applied for a scholarship to Notre Dame, which was kind of like my next chapter.
So you decided more to stay in America to go after a master's. I'm very well aware of that trajectory, of course, as a fellow foreigner. And that motivated you to go for a master's degree. So why Notre Dame? Why did you pick Notre Dame?
There's many reasons. One of the main reasons is obviously Notre Dame is the Fighting Irish, right? So they've specific scholarships for Irish people. So I applied for a scholarship there and I was awarded it. So I think something like MBA grads coming out of Stanford GSB often have 250K of debt.
Wow.
I got my master's from Notre Dame for 25,000, and the master's itself costs about 100K. But because I was awarded that academic scholarship, it made sense. There's other reasons as well. I played Gaelic football growing up. They had a Gaelic football team, kind of going back into the Irish culture there. I grew up, obviously, Catholic, being Irish. It's the number one Catholic university in the US, I think in the world, actually. So there was a lot of kind of cultural elements that definitely made sense. I wanted to go to a national college as opposed to a local college. And to be honest, I think it was the best decision I ever made in terms of what that next step at that point in my career. It's interesting as well, because obviously I love San Francisco and I'm living back here now. But South Bend, Indiana was definitely a little bit of a 180 from here. But it definitely broadened my horizons. More of America, I would say, is South Bend than San Francisco. And now I have that, I would say, cultural awareness in the US as well, which is definitely benefiting me. And recently I got asked to I was elected as the president for the Notre Dame Tech Forum in San Francisco. So I can give back to that community whilst also being in the Bay Area as well, which is really exciting.
That's absolutely incredible and doesn't help with you being intimidating to me. So is that just me, Nikki? Is that just the effect she has on me, or do you feel it too?
Oh, no, I feel the same way too. The list just keeps going on and on. I'm like, all right.
It is that you're so nice that I immediately liked you when we first connected. But otherwise I'd be like, oh my God. So after you graduated, what was the first move? What did you want to do? What would be kind of your dream job? And what did you think, again, being a foreigner, was within grasp?
Yes, I've always wanted, after working for Enterprise Ireland, I wanted to work in venture capital. But I actually didn't actively try that hard because I actually had a little bit of imposter syndrome, believe it or not. I thought I had to come from like a legacy family, or I thought if you
Yeah.
wanted to break into VC, you have to go to Stanford or Harvard. And there is obviously a community of people who are in VC from Notre Dame, but I would say it's not as extensive as those other schools. So I was looking at tech companies again, looking at partnerships type roles, sales, different things. And then the odd time I would apply to a VC, but I didn't have high expectations that I would be successful. And it was interesting because at that point, I had already established a relationship with 500 Global, which, for those of you who don't know, it's one of the top accelerators in the world, competes quite extensively with Y Combinator. And when I was in Enterprise Ireland, I tried to establish a partnership with them that they're in the middle, they're still progressing at the moment. So I had that relationship there and a role became available. So whilst at Notre Dame, I flew out to San Francisco, met the team and got that opportunity. So it was really exciting. And I did that for about 7 months and went through an entire batch and a cycle of like working with the portfolio companies, which was fun. But then whilst I was there, my current boss, who's the managing partner at Unusual Ventures, he was actually, and this is kind of what I was saying about the theme of the chapter before leads to the next chapter. It's not necessarily the original chapter, if that makes sense. It's kind of a little bit of a back and forth. But John, he was actually my lecturer at Notre Dame. So that's really interesting. So he never went to Notre Dame. He went to Stanford. He teaches at Stanford. He went to Harvard and then he went to U Chicago. But he's very Catholic. So he loves the Notre Dame community. He teaches there. So we had established a relationship and he offered me the opportunity to come in as director of programs. So it's quite interesting that like that job opportunity didn't come straight out of Notre Dame, but it came 7 months down the line once I'd established myself at 500, and Unusual made sense for where I wanted to go long term in my career. So I made that jump.
That's really interesting. Kind of something we talk about a lot at Beyond the Hire is your network is your net worth. And always to be networking, whatever you're doing, I guess whatever part of your career you're in, whether you're in school or working a side hustle, starting your own business, or have a job and you're just networking with your colleagues, however big or small the company is, it generally will lead you to your next experience or your next work opportunity. So it sounds like that very much was the case for you. Can you talk a little bit about how to open yourself up to networking opportunities, right? Or to meeting people? Because you said, oh, he was a lecturer. We established a relationship. I'm sure a lot of people listening have had a lot of lecturers and they do not have relationships with them. I don't remember all my lecturers. I definitely don't have relationships with all of them. Although shout out to University of Amsterdam, great place. Yeah, if you're listening and you were one of my professors, reach out. I would love to get reconnected. But how do you open yourself up to those kinds of relationships?
When it comes to networking, and I would say that's part of my job now. I've obviously been very good at it from a young age, and I've kind of had to be because I've had to network to establish myself in the US when I didn't really have a network here. And then for my job and career, and then also if I wanted to get sponsored, I needed an established network as well. So there's been a few different elements of why I've learned to be so good at it. The way I always approach it is you want to have genuine connections with every single person, right? So it's not transactional. It's like you give until eventually you can take back. And that's when you need that favor, then they owe you one. But it's not disingenuous in the way that you do it. So say how I did it with John. So just for context about John's background, John's invested in 29 unicorns. He was the fourth employee at Lightspeed, scaled it up to 400 employees. He was an early investor in Snapchat, Pinterest, MuleSoft, AppDynamics. He founded Unusual 8 years ago. Now it's built over $1 billion AUM. We're on
So impressive.
He's amazing. So naturally, when he's teaching at Stanford or teaching at Notre Dame, there's a lot of students who immediately just ask him for jobs. And they're like, oh, can I work for you? Can I work at one of your portfolio companies? And like, this is a guy who gets 1,000 emails a day. So yeah. That's a different impression if that's the first interaction you have with a gentleman like him. My approach was I would sit at the front of the class and I would really absorb the content that he was teaching and I would ask extremely thoughtful questions. So I just raise my hand. I'd be like, but why are you teaching it like this when it comes to, say, growth hypothesis or value hypothesis and product market fit and different topics? And I could see by the way he started to react to me, he was like, this girl is quite smart. And off the back of that, then we started to establish that relationship. And then I told him, I was like, I'm interviewing at this fund, and you could kind of see the cogs turning. And then actually, when I was at the last fund, I brought him in for this fireside chat to potentially co-invest with the portfolio and potentially some of the companies that we had invested in within the batch. And he was so impressed by the way that I ran that event that he made an opportunity for me at Unusual. It was very much a show, don't tell. Like, there was never one point throughout that relationship that I asked for a job. I just showed him, I'm someone you probably want on your team. And then the opportunity presented itself. I didn't know, but when I got that first email being like, Niamh, let's jump on a call, I had a gut feeling that there was an opportunity waiting for me. And I think this is kind of how I approach most relationships, is show genuine interest, be kind, don't ask people for favors if you're not owed one. And usually what goes out comes back around, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think even if you remember correctly on our call, we were talking about events in the Bay Area, like, oh, if you happen to be here, there's this really cool event on a yacht if you want to come. And I'm like, God, I wish I was right there right now. I'm not. I'm like, do I want to fly out? Kinda. And I remember thinking, wow, again, I can see even you doing it then, as in like, you're so kind and you're just kind of a giver in that way, as in like, I have this opportunity if you want to join. So thinking back, I can even see how that worked in real life. That's amazing. So can you give another example? So he was your obviously professor, so you had the ability to kind of show him your intelligence just by asking those questions. And then in your career, involving him. Can you talk about someone else maybe you've had kind of opportunity to network with? Maybe from when you had your makeup company, your makeup brushes company, Pink and Smoky, to getting to Enterprise Ireland, right? You said the people who awarded kind of the scholarship and everything like that, they came from Enterprise Ireland, or they were behind it. How did you network with them that then led into that opportunity?
With Enterprise Ireland, that was just an application. But then obviously I presented my entire background, and that's what kind of sold them on that job. I would say it kind of comes back to like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. So if I even go back to the Pink and Smoky days, I was a 16-year-old girl with no technical brand per se. I wasn't a celebrity or anything compared to like, you think of Hailey Bieber and Selena Gomez. And obviously my company by no means scaled to that. It was profitable in Ireland and I didn't have to work for a number of years. A lot of it came down to like getting my products and just going around salons, knocking on the door, being ballsy and saying, can I talk to the manager? And kind of just upselling what I was doing. That was very much like, I'm putting myself out there, doing my research. Who do I want to talk to? So a lot of networking comes down to sales. It's who do you want to talk to? Why do you want to talk to them? And why should they want to talk to you? There's always little nuances in terms of how you do it. Say, for example, now in Silicon Valley, I very much take advantage of the Irish network. And if I'm hosting a dinner and I need a CMO, I might look at my Rolodex and I'm like, oh, who's Irish? And Lorraine Tuchel, she's from 20 minutes down the road of me in Ireland. She's the CMO of Google, right? That's someone you can reach out to. Or say in the Notre Dame community, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm like, who went to Notre Dame that might be interested in this dinner? So, every person has their communities and places. That's kind of a soft touch, I would say. And then you can leverage that, I would say, to break into other communities. Then you can say, oh, I've got these people who are CMOs at these companies that are coming to my dinner. Would you be interested? And then they're like, oh, this person's interesting because she's able to bring these people into the room. So it then ends up having this kind of snowball effect. But I think it ultimately comes down to like being useful and like be very careful about every interaction that you have with someone so that they're like, oh, because like if I invite someone to an event and it goes very poorly, they're not going to go to future events. So everything is about retaining your personal brand, making sure that everything you do is to a high quality, and then it just starts to perpetuate itself.
Do you have like a secret notebook where you write everyone's names down and kind of something about them that you remember in the moment, or something that would be nice to bring up again? Or do you remember everything?
I don't have a notebook. What I would say is sometimes I'll go back into previous messages. And then in the previous message, I'll be like, oh, how are the kids doing? Oh, I saw that they won this football tournament. So that kind of ignites that. I don't have the time to write notes about every single person after every single interaction. I know there's people who do, and I know people have, well, my friends have personal CRMs, which all the power to you. That's amazing. But like, I just don't have the time. But LinkedIn is essentially my CRM.
No, I get the pros and cons, right? I kind of love, I would say, my memory is good, but also, when it comes to the little tidbits of information, sometimes I don't naturally remember it. So sometimes I am there like, oh, let me take little notes here and there to remind myself, oh, their kid was in this tournament or something like that, or this person is part of this charity, to kind of remember to ask about it again, because I do know personally, I always appreciate when people remember something about me, even though it's so unnecessary. But I'm not naturally gifted with that kind of memory. So I'm always jealous of people who can just naturally kind of remember everything. It always makes me think of, I don't know, maybe it's just me, the Devil Wears Prada scene, right? Where they're standing with Meryl Streep and they're whispering who everyone is as they're walking up. I'm like, God, to live in a future where I have someone who just whispers that information in my ear would be absolutely incredible, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think in venture, we do that a little bit. I think, in our fund, we all have our own distinct networks. And like, if I see someone is connected to my boss, I'm like, who is this person? What should we know about them? Should they come to an event? We all kind of do that a little bit. I think it's human nature.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So let's talk a little bit about unusual. I know we've kind of touched upon it lightly, but can you talk a little bit more about specifically what unusual does?
Yes, we're an early stage venture capital fund, currently on Fund 3. We've got 1 billion AU, primarily focused on investing in technical founders. So B2B are very important kind of subsectors, are infrastructure, AI applications, vertical SaaS and fintech. Stereotypical check size is 2 million to 20 million. We tend to lead, don't follow these rounds at pre-seed, seed, Series A, and might take allocation in later rounds as well. Obviously mentioned John and Jody Banzel are the co-founders. So John, as I mentioned, he was the fourth employee at Lightspeed, scaled it up to 400 employees through investments in like Snapchat, Pinterest, etc. He was the first investor in AppDynamics, which is actually our co-founder Jody's company. So AppDynamics sold to Cisco for 3.7 billion. And then since then, he's been a 3-time unicorn founder. So he's currently the co-founder and CEO of Harness. So incredible background. So we have John as like a tenured investor as one of our co-founders. And then Jody is an amazing founder who knows how to build these companies from the ground up. And then in terms of how we differentiate ourselves as a fund, so the minute you take money from us, we're very hands-on in our approach and have an entire founder services model. So rather than, there's a lot of VCs that they give you a check and then you never even talk to the partner anymore. With us, we have sales partners that go out and start getting you sales. We have talent partners who go out and start hiring for you. We have product leaders who are working with you on your enhancements. So we're not chasing becoming the biggest fund in terms of AUM. We want to be the fund with the best founder outcomes, and the results speak for themselves. So at the moment, in terms of number of companies that reach Series A that have raised seed funding, it's something like 12%. Within our portfolio, that sits at 80%. And then in terms of companies that go from Series A to Series B, I think it's something around the same, about 10% is the industry average, while within our portfolio, it's about 60%. We're very consolidated in our approach. We're writing about 5 core checks a year, and in total about 20 checks a year, compared to a lot of funds which are doing 200 checks a year, spray and pray approach. We don't want only 1% of our children to graduate to college. We want all of our founders to do really well. So really aligns to my personal values. And then just another kind of final note on this, most of our LPs are not-for-profits. So children's hospitals, historically Black colleges. So the whole aim is that when we scale up these companies, the money is going back for forces for good, which personally that aligns a lot to my values as well.
That's incredible. And you are their director of programs. Can you explain a little bit exactly what that means for those who don't know what that title means?
Yeah, so I lead all of our portfolio ops, events, programs at Unusual Ventures. So a lot of my role kind of is building brand awareness and top of funnel sourcing amongst high caliber founder groups. So I do a lot of work kind of promoting Unusual within the schools and kind of technical founder groups. And then the other is working with our portfolio founders so that they reference and love Unusual. So a lot of that is networking, connecting them to leaders, helping them scale up. And then I also lead our Unusual Academy program, which our fall academy kicks off next week, which is really exciting, where we essentially teach them how to get product market fit. So John's taught a version of this for 20 years. And as I mentioned, he was my lecturer. He teaches at Stanford, etc. as well. So he's taught this content to the founder of Notion and founder of Pinterest and some incredible people. So we're bringing in some of the top potential founders into this program and really helping them to get the right foundation to start their company.
If anyone wants to apply or be part of the academy, how would they go about doing that?
So if you go on to unusual.vc, we have an academy tab that you can apply. Applications are closed right now, but it's going to be opening up in the new year for our university edition, where we're going to be offering 25K fellowships to students who want to work on their ideas. So also always feel free to connect with me and I can send you all of the details as well.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we link Niamh's contact details, her LinkedIn and everything when we publish the podcast, so that if you're someone who wants to apply, you can reach out to her. Are you one of those people who accepts all connection requests, or do they need to put something in the note for you to accept them?
I would say usually put something in the note. Since I'm so active at these conferences now, I get so many different people trying to connect with me. I will always try to get back to people if they have a genuine question, but it's hard to connect with 40 people a day. There's only so many hours, unfortunately.
Yeah, and also I believe there's a limit. I feel like our CEO has hit it many a time. She's an incredible networker as well. I remember just her having to go through LinkedIn and literally remove people in order to be able to add new people, which hadn't happened to me yet. And I didn't know that that was the thing, but she had reached kind of the maximum there. So for those, I mean, I feel like there's so much here, right, to unpack, and we don't have that much time left. I have a feeling a lot of maybe people earlier on in their career who want a career like yours, right? But they might not have started their own company when they were 16 or exactly have your trajectory, of course, which was very unique to you and who you are. Someone who wants to end up where you are, what would you recommend they try to do, right? They're already graduated, because most of our listeners have already graduated. So it's not as much as like, this is what you should study. Are there any recommendations you have? If you want to end up doing what I do, these are the steps you should take, or here's where you should network. These are the events you should go to.
100%. I think there's a misconception that if you're going to be in VC, it's all analyzing, which I think that's the way it was back in the day. I think it's starting to change because of ChatGPT and all these foundational model companies that can write a memo for you now. And I think also, if you think back, I think it was in the 90s, there were something like 60 VCs in Silicon Valley. Today, there's 3,000 VCs. So a lot of the role of a VC is now, how do I win and sell money to that founder before another VC comes in before me? So it's becoming much more competitive, I would say, on our side. How you win is, I don't think it's your analytical skills, it's your access. So the best thing you can do is getting into distinct founder networks. And a lot of how I've been successful is, I love startups, founders, all of that. The reason I'm getting in here is because all my friends are startup founders. I'm in the networks. I've been hired because I have a distinct network that obviously my boss wants access to. So like literally going to founder parties, going to conferences, just being in the ecosystem, being in the know. If you see a VC you really like, start finding founders that are building on thesis solutions and start sending them deal flow. And if they like the deal flow, they will want to hire you because they want to bring in associates who can bring them good deal flow. Because a lot of people are like, oh, how do I break in? I like analyzing. And it's like, you need a little bit of that. Due diligence is definitely important. But if you're not bringing the top of funnel founders in front of the VC, it's going to be very tough for you to break in. But it's, as I said, it's not rocket science. If you love the idea of working in VC so much, you should be doing what a VC is already doing and hanging out with founders, learning what's hot tech is going on, hanging out in some of the like startup hubs in the city, having coffees and building that up. And then off the back of that, the opportunity should present itself. There's a guy I know, he's at Signal Fire. He was an editor at TechCrunch. He didn't have a background that was like a clear path to VC, but he was just such in the know when it came to like startup and founders and events that were going on, that it was easy for him to break in because that fund obviously wanted his network. So it's just being a little bit different makes you interesting. I think the days of having an MBA and breaking into VC, I don't think they're gone, but I think it's changing. And you see funds like Founders Fund where they almost think it's like an anti-signal, I believe, to have that.
Yeah, it's good. And it's great to hear because Signal Fire is one of our partners. We help them with a lot of their hiring for their portfolio company. So we love to hear Signal Fire mentioned as well, of course, but that's really great to hear. Another question on another part of that, and I think that's really good information to have because I actually hadn't heard that before on the podcast to start bringing deal flow. So clever. You know entrepreneurs well because you were one. Obviously, you work with a ton of them. What are some green flags when it comes to entrepreneurs? I feel like a lot of what I hear is you invest in the people as much as in the technology or the ideas behind the technology. What are the green flags?
So what we like to say is we like founders who are seeing something or building something that's non-consensus, right? So it's something that like the whole world can't really see, because if the world can see it, why has it not been done before, right? So it's like the founder may have worked at VMware and they were building a product, and then they saw something that was really interesting, that was like a problem that they wanted to solve, but they decided to keep it to themselves and build it, right? Unless you were in that specific role at that company, you may not actually see that as a problem that you could fix, right? That's one thing. We really love technical founders. What John believes truly is that your CEO has to be technical and has to be your product person. Not every fund believes that, but we're very passionate about that at Unusual. We like to see, obviously, very holistic teams. I always say we like co-founders that have worked together previously and then decided to go out on their own together. I know there's founders who do YC co-founder matching. I've never seen that work. I'm sure it has for some people, but like you need to hike together. You need to have that tension. You need to have a really strong bond, because there's going to be a lot of problems down the road when there's like board members and different people involved, that like you need to be so tight as a team that you'll be able to overcome those obstacles. I think it ultimately then it comes to the innate traits. Does this person have the grit? Are they willing to learn? Because realistically, they're going to have to reiterate their ideas several times before they get to product market fit. If they're fixated on the solution that they're building and they're not listening to customers, that's probably not going to scale up effectively, because what your customer wants is essentially what you should be building, and you should be adapting the product based on that. And yeah, there's so many different traits, skills, attributes. John always says this, and I find it quite funny. He says, as an investor, when you're looking at a founder, it's like dating. You either have chemistry or you don't. So like if an investor passes, never take it personally. You probably just weren't the right fit, because it's, if you're with an investor and you're building up this company, you're going to have a relationship with them for potentially 10 years onwards. It's a longer relationship than a lot of marriages. So it's important that you get that right, obviously, as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then when it comes to hiring at your portfolio companies, do you guys have a similar philosophy when it comes to finding talent?
Yeah, I would say so. Now, I'm by no means the expert as it pertains to hiring. John Volk is our talent partner, and he does an incredible job at that. But we're looking for hires that are willing to do that kind of 0 to 1 work. So get into the weeds with these companies. And it's actually quite interesting right now, because what we saw in the past was people who work at bigger companies like OpenAI, etc., they didn't want to go earlier. But now a lot of people who are at like Google, etc., are willing to go very early, because they're realizing that the AI that they're building at these big tech companies isn't actually as interesting as what's going on at Series A, Series B companies. So they actually have to go earlier. So it's really, really fascinating what we're seeing on the hiring side as well.
Yeah, it's a trend we've been seeing a lot more too. And when I've been talking to some talent partners, they've also expressed that, there used to be more security at the big companies, job security, whereas obviously in more recent years, we've seen that that's not necessarily the case. So, if they're not staying for the job security, they're going to go where the interesting technology is. So that absolutely makes sense. And we're seeing similar trends. Most tech founders, I'm not sure if you found the same thing, are more introverted. They're not as eager to go out and mingle and do all the things. How would you recommend they get in front of the investors and be part of the ecosystem?
So I think there's multiple ways to skin a cat. Once again, it comes back to like doing your research and then being very intentional in your outreach. Investors' jobs are to source companies. Despite the fact you might be introverted and all of these things, if you have really good tech and you have a really good idea that you're passionate about, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a good idea. We think that, to be quite frank, a lot of our portfolio founders are introverted, and we're training them on how to actually get that kind of social skills and work the go-to-market and the product market fit and all of those things, right? Obviously, if you're interested in Unusual specifically, definitely look at our Unusual Academy. I'm always happy to connect. And I think if you find the right community builders, I'm one, there's several others in the city that I can obviously put you in touch with as well. We're constantly hosting events. And it's like, if you go to one, then it starts having this snowball effect of like, oh, now I'm invited to this one and I have this connection. And the more that you build out that network, the easier it's going to be, is for sure.
So slight follow-up question, right? You said that Unusual obviously leads, so you don't follow. How do you make sure that you can lead and that you're in the position to do that?
So I think a lot of it is our value proposition as a fund is very strong. So we're often competing with a lot of the big funds on deals, but these founders, they take our terms and our valuation because they specifically want to work with Unusual and John. We have relationships with founders very early on. So say the university edition of the Academy, a lot of these are technical students. They might be 19, 20 years old, and we're giving them this fellowship. And then when they set up their second and third company, a lot of the time we're the first people that they call as well. So we have those relationships. And it's interesting. There was 2 girls that we brought in from Harvard in the university edition this year, and fantastic. They were doing computer science at Harvard. They were in their first year, 19 years old, and they just dropped out. And we've given them $1.5 million. They're in a hacker house in the city, and they're scaling up that company. So we obviously don't endorse people to drop out of college, but like, if you have a burning idea and you have this opportunity, obviously go and run with it. That was one relationship that started very early on, and now obviously is progressing, and we've led their seed round. And obviously John teaches at Stanford and Notre Dame and all these schools. So we're meeting a lot of the top students very early on in their careers. In the same way, I obviously met the Enterprise Ireland people very early on because I did my own company. It's like being in the right ecosystems, and then that obviously helps you later on down the road.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Niamh. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners have too. Thank you so much for coming on Beyond the Hire podcast, and thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you for having me.